Black Myth Wukong was a surprise hit action RPG from new developer known as Game Science, and following the breakout success of their previous game, it shouldn't come as a surprise that they have officially announced their next project, which is another Black Myth game in the series, this time called Black Myth Zhong Kui. In this video, we're going to be going over everything we know about the next entry in the series, including when you can expect to see it next, what the story will be like, and so much more. I honestly didn't expect the Black Myth series to be an anthology. I honestly thought we were going to get a Black Myth Wukong 2, but here we are. We have a lot to cover, so check the chapters for easy viewing, and let's dive in. So Black Myth Zhong Kui was announced at Gamescom 2025's event, and the announcement was made by none other than Jeff Keighley himself. The game is once again being developed and presumably published by Game Science, and will be yet another single-player action RPG based on Chinese folklore. This time around, you'll be playing as Zhong Kui, a ghost-catching god who wanders between hell and earth. According to Chinese folklore, Zhong Kui is a vanisher of ghosts and evil spirits, and he even has an army of 80,000 demons that will do whatever he says and fight on his behalf. And we got a look at that in the trailer with a little group of demons carrying the main character's gear next to his tiger. And if you've ever heard of the 5 bats of fortune in Chinese mythology, you may have actually heard of Zhong Kui, since he's one of the main characters associated with that superstition. And I have a gut feeling that Game Science is going to find a way to incorporate the bats into the gameplay of Black Myth. According to reports, this new game actually started out as DLC for Black Myth Wukong, but it eventually became clear that the team was extremely passionate about this project, and the expectations were super high due to the surprise success of the original game, so the decision was made to spin the DLC off into a fully fledged standalone project. So in terms of gameplay, it's presumably going to be yet another third-person action RPG similar to the structure of God of War, Dark Souls, or Bloodborne, but a lot of us are expecting some tweaks to the formula to differentiate it from Black Myth Wukong and make it feel more like a unique experience and put you in the shoes of Zhong Kui, so you can experience what it is about him that makes him so unique. Unlike the protagonist of the last game, Sun Wukong, Zhong Kui is a human through and through. Throughout history, he has been portrayed as a burly man with lots of hair with a huge sword that he always carried with his right hand. In fact, some have already started speculating that in the trailer for Black Myth Zhong Kui, the long thing that the demons are carrying is actually the main character's sword. And if that's really how big it's going to be in this gameplay, this is going to be a really interesting Souls-like experience. Now, we don't know much about the gameplay just yet, aside from the fact that it started development as a DLC for the first game, so we can probably expect a similar structure in terms of progression and combat, albeit with tweaks to the gameplay and movesets to make this more of a Zhong Kui experience and less of a Wukong one. One thing I'm actually hoping to see from this new game is more of a traditional Souls-like structure, but only a little bit more. Like, the original Black Myth Wukong was pretty light on traditional Souls-like elements. The moment-to-moment gameplay was very Dark Souls inspired, but it was actually taking notes from God of War 2018. And I think we can all agree that as far as Souls-like goes, Black Myth Wukong was pretty linear and more God of War-like. And it was also a lot easier than a traditional Souls-like game, which obviously there's nothing wrong with that, because if that's the experience the developers want to make, then that's their decision, and I honestly support it. I kind of prefer that it's more like God of War and less like Souls-like games, mainly due to how many Souls-like games we actually get. You know how there's comic book movie fatigue? Well, there should be a thing called like mid Souls-like fatigue. But yeah, with the first game out of the way, the sequel is now a good jumping off point to start expanding upon the mechanics and foundations of the first game, which means it could be a good time to introduce more diverse stat building, larger and more open-ended levels, and more intense boss fights. Think about how Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was a very simple and straightforward Metroidvania style game with some Souls-like elements, but then Jedi Survivor opened the world up a bit and made the combat a lot deeper now that the foundations of the series were fully established. That's essentially what I'm hoping we get for Black Myth Zhong Kui, and judging by the early statements from the developers, it sounds that's exactly like what we're getting. Game Science stated during Gamescom that their tradition is to make big announcements on August 20th, which is why this game was announced then as well. But it's also a sign that we're going to be waiting a while until we get something new about the game. Personally, I'm not expecting the second trailer for this game to drop until next August 20th, and then it'll probably launch on August 20th of 2027 or 2028, which would give it a 3-year gap from the first Black Myth game. And 3 to 4 years may sound like a pretty fast turnaround, but since this game was apparently started out as a DLC for the first Black Myth, I think it's understandable that they'd be able to get this new project through development relatively quickly. So it might be a bit of a painful wait for August 20th, 2027, but at the end of the day, 2 years between reveal and launch is a lot better than most other AAA game studios can do nowadays, so I'm fine with it. Plus, it'll give me time to go replay Black Myth Wukong again to prepare myself. Now, one interesting aspect of this announcement was regarding platforms. The first Black Myth Wukong game launched on PC and PlayStation 5. At first, due to some apparent development issues with the Xbox. Granted, the Xbox version was still in the works, and it just recently came out by the time you're watching this video, but the developers were pretty open at the fact that they were apparently struggling with the Xbox Series S hardware, so they had to delay that version of the game. Now, there have been some theories floating around and some secondhand sources that have said that Sony actually paid for timed exclusive for the console version of Black Myth Wukong, which wouldn't be out of character for them, but I also don't know if I believe that, simply because Sony is usually not shy about that kind of stuff. If Sony pays for an exclusivity of a game, they're usually going to make it a big deal about the entire situation. But if Sony still insists to this day that they had nothing to do with the Xbox port being delayed, and since Game Science likes to hold on to major announcements and releases until August 20th of each year, that meant that the Xbox version of Black Myth Wukong ended up being a 1-year PS5 console exclusive. But I'm bringing all of this up because during the announcement of Black Myth Zhong Kui, Game Science stated that the game would be launching on PC as well as all mainstream console platforms, which I found very interesting and almost strange wording. On one hand, you could interpret this as Game Science simply not knowing which versions of the game will be available at launch, so they don't want to commit to a port of the game that they're not 100% certain it's going to be done in time. That way they don't have the awkward repeat of Black Myth Wukong where they advertised an Xbox port, but then had to delay a year due to technical issues or, the exclusivity reasons. But then again, the use of the word mainstream seems to suggest that this could be just them saying that the game isn't launching on the Nintendo Switch 2, since that console is trying to be more of a versatile gaming platform, even though a lot of developers are still struggling to get more graphically demanding games running on that console. The recent port of Elden Ring springs to mind. Or is this Game Science simply stating that they're not going to do an Xbox port of the next game because they don't see it as a mainstream console due to Xbox's low international sales? But that being said, it's a little strange for them to say all mainstream consoles and not specify which ones. Personally, I'm expecting and thinking that Game Science is trying to give themselves a bit of wiggle room to drop a console port if they need more time to get it up and running, because simply they don't want to repeat the drama of Black Myth Wukong's Xbox port. They probably don't want to commit to any specific console just yet because they don't really know which certain console hardware might give them issues, if any issues at all, and they want some space to be able to adjust their launch platform lineup as needed. At the end of the day, Black Myth Zhong Kui looks like the perfect follow-up to Black Myth Wukong, not just a continuation, but an expansion that dives deeper into Chinese mythology with a completely different perspective. I think it's clear that Game Science wants to build this into a long-lasting anthology franchise, and if Zhong Kui delivers on its promises of bigger levels and more complex systems, then we could be looking at yet another breakout hit that cements this series as one of the most exciting franchises in gaming. We might have to wait until 2027 or 2028 to get our hands on it, but all of that extra time is only going to build the hype, and honestly, I think Game Science has already proven that they can deliver something worth waiting for. I really hope that this game is going to be almost like the Jedi Survivor of the Jedi Fallen Order series, where it's similar in gameplay styles, but everything is just kind of ramped up. The open world levels are just bigger and just more in depth. But that's going to wrap it up with this video, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe with your notifications on, and until next time, this has been Wes, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.